So, you're thinking about applying for an LMIA in Canada? Well, before you jump in, let's talk about some of the hidden sharks that might just be beneath the surface. Today, we're diving into the murky waters of LMIA disadvantages. Yes, that's right. There are disadvantages in having an LMIA, in contrast to all the noise out there that you hear about the need for an LMIA. So, I want you to stay tuned as I'm going to give you a different perspective. Hey folks, it's Brandon Miller here from the Maple team. So, if you've been looking into work permits in Canada, you've probably heard the term LMIA. This stands for a Labor Market Impact Assessment. Now, an LMIA is basically an approval for an employer to hire a foreign worker in a specific job, and it allows the foreign worker to apply for a work permit. So basically, most people see it as the employer gets a document, you get a job, and everyone lives happily ever after. But like most things in life, it's not that simple. Today we're breaking down the disadvantages of having an LMIA. And trust me, there's more to it than just having to fill out so much paperwork. Let's start with the big one, the closed work permit. When you get a job through an LMIA, you're tied to that employer. And by tied, I really mean tied. You're going to be working for that specific employer in that specific role. Now, if your employer turns out to be, well, not so great, maybe they're demanding, maybe they're playing around with you a little bit, maybe they know how dependent you are on them, or maybe they just have this proclivity for making your life miserable. Either way, you are stuck. It's not like you can just pack up and find a new job easily. You're bound to that job unless you go through the whole LMIA process again with a new employer, which, let's be honest, this can be very challenging. Now, with that said, there are options for other permits for people in abusive situations, but these are really only for exceptional circumstances. Next, let's talk about immigration pathways. Not all immigration pathways are created equal, especially if you're eyeing permanent residency. The type of job you get through the LMIA must align with your long-term immigration goals. If you end up in a low-skilled job, you'll find out later that this experience doesn't count towards your PR application, and it might even lock you into that job category and make it difficult to transition into another LMIA, or worse, a job that will allow you to transition into permanent residency. For example, let's say you land an LMIA as a housekeeper, as you desperately want to get to Canada, but later realize you want to apply for PR under the caregiver program. Well, newsflash, these are different job codes. If you've been focusing all your energy on housekeeping duties, you might not meet the requirements to transition into the caregiver category. It's like being a professional soccer player and then trying to get a job as a basketball coach. Yes, they're both sports, but the skill sets are completely different. Typecasting. No, not the Hollywood kind. I'm talking about getting pigeonholed into a job category that might not serve you well in the long run. If your LMIA positions you as a low-skilled worker, that label can follow you around, making it very difficult to switch industries or climb the career ladder. You might start off as kitchen staff, but have dreams of becoming a head chef. However, if you're stuck in a role because of your LMIA, it might be challenging to gain experience that you need to step up. For those of you who think the LMIA process is just a bit of paperwork like getting a letter from an employer, which I hear a lot, no. The LMIA application is complex, time-consuming, and depending on the sentiment of the day, open to abrupt changes. Employers have to prove that they've tried to hire a Canadian first. They've gone through exhaustive survey of the job market, and only then can they justify hiring you. This involves advertising the job, interviewing local candidates, and documenting the entire process. It's not just a one-and-done deal. It's more like a 3 to 6 month long saga with plot twists and a lot of paperwork. Here's another thing to watch out for, the tourist LMIA trap. Yes, it's possible to get an LMIA while you're in Canada as a tourist, but tread very carefully, especially as there were policies in place previously for people to apply for a work permit in Canada, but this has now undergone some significant changes which do not make this an option. On that note, the government once dangled this shiny carrot in front of tourists by allowing them to apply for work permits while visiting. Sounds great, right? Well, except it created a lot more problems than it solved. People rushed in thinking they could easily transition from a tourist to a worker, only to find out that the process was far more complicated, risky, and expensive, as people needed to support themselves while they were waiting for an LMIA to be processed, along with the work permit. And this led to a lot of people being in some very bad places. Another very serious example of misfortune was from a guy from South Asia who got caught in this trap. He had an LMIA approved prior to coming to Canada, and that's the important part, prior to coming to Canada. He entered Canada on a tourist visa without declaring that he had an approved LMIA and the intention to work. He thought he could just come in, flagpole, and yes, see my other videos on flagpoling. He would go down to the border and he would get his work permit. Unfortunately, the border officers were having none of it. Not only did he not get his work permit, he was deemed to have misrepresented his intentions by coming in as a tourist when he was actually planning to work. Moral of the story, timing and transparency are everything, and so is having proper legal advice and context if you're making this move. Another glaring disadvantage, limited flexibility. If you're in a highly specialized field or your skills are in high demand, an LMIA might seem like a golden ticket. But here's the kicker. If something goes wrong, like your company downsizes, relocates, or heaven forbid closes, you're left in a very precarious position. Granted, if you are specialized, there might be a need for you and you should be able to transition easily. Let's say you're a software engineer and you've scored an LMIA to work with a promising tech startup in Toronto. 6 months in, the company loses funding and shuts down. Unlike the Canadian colleagues who can hop to another company, you're stuck scrambling trying to find another job, and you're going to have to go through the entire LMIA process again. And let me tell you, most companies, they aren't thrilled about this kind of red tape. We've seen this particularly in the startup industry. So, always make sure that you not only have a plan B in mind, but also you have the ability to ensure that you are well versed on how to transition easily. Now I'm going to switch gears a little bit, and I'm going to talk about something that doesn't get as much press as it should. I'm going to talk about the scamming industry. Now, there's a lot of people out there that love to exploit the LMIA process. There are plenty of unauthorized lawyers who promise to get you an LMIA for a fee. But here's the catch. It's illegal for them to charge you for an LMIA, and any legitimate immigration consultant will tell you that. However, scammers prey on the desperate and the uninformed who are in search of a work opportunity. This work opportunity is life-changing. It's going to lead to a better life a lot of times for people that are applying and their family, thus making these false promises even more believable and allowing these scammers to pocket your hard-earned money. Picture this. Someone promises you an LMIA for $10,000, and apparently that's pretty cheap. You pay, thinking you're one step closer to that Canadian dream, only to find out that the paperwork is fake and your money's gone. Even worse, you could find yourself in hot water with the immigration authorities for using fraudulent documents. It's like buying a fake ticket to a sold-out concert, except this time, the consequences are much more severe. Last but not least, there's the negative perception that some employers have towards LMIAs. Because the process is so cumbersome and time-consuming, many employers would rather not deal with it. They might see your LMIA status as a burden, making them less likely to hire you, even if you're the most qualified candidate. Also, as a side note, I see lots of employers who have some pretty outlandish perceptions, such as, if you go out and commit a crime and they're sponsoring them, are they liable for your acts? Well, the short answer is no, but when I hear this, I'm educating employers as it signals to me that there's a lot of barriers out there that exist in their minds with this whole process. In my experience, it's only employers who really need to fill a position that's going to go through this bureaucratic process. And even if they have an expert such as myself guiding them and doing the process for and with them, it's still challenging. So, while you're trying to sell your skills, your lack of status and your need for an LMIA to employ you might just be a bit of a deal breaker. So, there you have it, the not so glamorous side of the LMIA. However, it's not all doom and gloom, guys, but definitely not the golden ticket some people think it is. And before you go, let me ask you in the comments here, What's your biggest concern about the LMIA process? Or have you had a different experience? Let's get the conversation started. Put a few things in the comments below because I'd love to hear from you. And if you found this video helpful, don't just stay on the bench. Get in the game, join our community. I want you to join the Maple team. You can do this by liking, subscribing, and turning on notifications so you can keep up to date on everything immigration. We're here to navigate the twists and turns of Canadian immigration together. So until next time, stay informed, stay savvy, and stay hopeful. We'll see you in the next video, guys.